The gun barrel felt cold against Lena's temple. She could hear Victor's voice somewhere in the chaos, sharp, furious, ordering his men to stand down. But the stranger holding her hostage wasn't listening. "You made a mistake, little waitress," he whispered. "Flirting with the devil has consequences." 20 minutes ago, she'd been pouring coffee. Now she was bleeding, terrified, and realizing the handsome businessman who left generous tips was actually Chicago's most dangerous man. And his enemies? They'd been watching her for months. If you're intrigued, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Lena Voss had worked at Rosie's Diner for 3 years, and in that time, she'd learned to read people the way some folks read newspapers. The truckers who wanted their coffee black and their conversation non-existent. The college kids who'd linger for hours over a single plate of fries, laptops open, pretending to study. The lonely regulars who came in just to hear another human voice. And then there was Victor Kane. He'd started showing up 6 months ago, always Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Always the same booth in the back corner. Always alone. The first thing Lena noticed was his suit, expensive in a way that didn't need labels. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind of clothing that whispered money rather than shouting it. The second thing she noticed were his hands. Clean, manicured, but with scars across the knuckles that told a different story than the expensive watch on his wrist. "Coffee?" she'd asked that first morning, pot already tilted. "Please." His voice had been smooth, controlled. Not cold exactly, but measured. Like every word cost something. She'd poured. He'd nodded thanks. That was it. But the second week, he'd looked up when she approached. "You always work mornings?" "Tuesday through Saturday, 6 to 2, she'd said. "Why, you writing a book about diner schedules?" The corner of his mouth had twitched. Almost a smile. "Just curious." Curiosity killed the cat. Good thing I'm not a cat. And somehow that had become their thing. The banter, the back and forth. Nothing serious, nothing that crossed any real lines, just the kind of harmless flirtation that made her shifts feel less like work. He never asked personal questions, never pushed. Just showed up, drank his coffee, sometimes ordered eggs over easy with wheat toast, and traded verbal jabs with her like they were playing a game only they understood. Lena knew better than to take it seriously. Guys like Victor, polished, confident, clearly wealthy, didn't actually want girls like her. She was 26, living in a cramped studio apartment in a neighborhood where gunshots occasionally interrupted her sleep, working for tips and dreaming about, maybe, someday, having enough money to take real art classes instead of watching YouTube tutorials on her cracked phone screen. But the attention was nice, harmless, safe. Until the morning, it wasn't. It was a Tuesday, early April, the kind of Chicago morning where winter hadn't quite let go and spring was still making excuses. The diner was mostly empty, just old Marty at the counter reading yesterday's sports section, and a couple of construction workers grabbing breakfast before their shift. Lena was refilling the coffee station when Victor walked in. Same suit, different tie. She grabbed the pot, ready with some quip about him being predictable, but something stopped her. His face was different, harder. The easy, almost playful expression he usually wore had been replaced with something that made the back of her neck prickle with instinctive warning. "Morning?" she said carefully, following him to his usual booth. "Rough night?" He didn't answer right away, just looked at her with those dark eyes that suddenly seemed less charming and more calculating. "Sit down, Lena." She blinked. "I'm working." "Sit down." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marty glanced up from his paper, sensing the shift in atmosphere even if he couldn't identify it. The construction workers went quiet mid-conversation. Lena slid into the booth opposite Victor, the coffee pot still in her hand like some ridiculous shield. "What's going on?" "You've been flirting with me for 6 months," he said. No preamble, no warmth. Her cheeks flushed. "I flirt with everyone. It's called being friendly. Gets better tips." "Do you know who I am?" The question landed like a physical thing. Lena set the coffee pot down on the table, her pulse starting to pick up speed. "A guy who tips well and likes his eggs runny?" "My name is Victor Kane." He said it like it should mean something, like the syllables themselves carried weight. Lena searched her memory, trying to place it, and came up blank. Okay? Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or amusement. You really don't know. Should I? He leaned back, studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. I own property all over this city. Restaurants, clubs, businesses. Some of them legitimate, many of them not. The words took a second to fully register. When they did, Lena felt her stomach drop. You're saying you're, what, a criminal? I'm saying I'm a businessman who operates outside conventional frameworks, he paused. But yes, if you want the simple version, I'm a criminal. And not just any criminal, Lena. I'm the criminal, at least in this city. She should have stood up. Should have walked away. Maybe even called the cops. Though some instinct told her that would be spectacularly stupid. Instead, she just sat there trying to reconcile the man who joked about her terrible taste in music with what he was telling her now. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand something. He leaned forward, and there was nothing casual about him anymore. This was a different person entirely. Those little games we've been playing, that stops. Now. I wasn't. Yes, you were. And it was entertaining. Harmless, even. But things have changed. What things? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it toward her. The photo showed Lena leaving her apartment building 3 days ago, coffee in hand, hair still wet from the shower. The angle suggested someone had taken it from across the street. Her blood went cold. What the hell is this? There are people in this city who want to hurt me, Victor said, his voice flat. They've been looking for leverage. Weaknesses. And you, Lena Voss, have become a weakness. I'm a waitress. I'm nobody. You're the woman I've been visiting twice a week for 6 months. The woman I smile at, talk to. That makes you somebody, whether you want to be or not. Lena felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. So what? You came here to warn me? Tell me to quit my job and move to Cleveland or something? I came here to tell you that you're going to see more of me. A lot more. Because if my enemies think you matter to me, the only way to keep you safe is to make sure you actually do. That's insane. That's reality. He stood up, dropping a $100 bill on the table. I'll pick you up after your shift, 2 o'clock. I'm not going anywhere with you. He looked down at her, and there was something in his eyes that wasn't quite pity, but wasn't far from it. Yes, you are. Because if you don't, you'll be dead by Friday. Then he walked out, leaving Lena sitting in the booth with her heart hammering against her ribs, and the construction workers staring at her like she'd just grown a second head. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She went through the motions, pouring coffee, taking orders, forcing smiles, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Victor Kane, a criminal, a dangerous man who apparently ran Chicago's underworld, whatever that meant, and somehow, impossibly, she'd become tangled up in his world without even realizing it. She thought about running, just grabbing her tips from the register and disappearing. But where would she go? She had $237 in her checking account, and no family closer than her aunt in Tucson who she hadn't spoken to in 4 years. At 1:45, she clocked out, changed out of her uniform in the tiny employee bathroom, pulling on jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. Her hands were shaking. Rosie, the diner's owner and Lena's closest thing to a friend in the city, caught her on the way out. You okay, hun? You've been acting weird all day. I'm fine, Lena lied. Just tired. That man who comes in regular? The one in the fancy suits? He bothering you? Lena's laugh came out strangled. Something like that? You want me to ban him? I don't care how much he tips. I won't have my girls harassed. The offer was sweet. Useless, but sweet. Thanks, Rosie. I'll handle it. Outside, the April air bit through her sweater. She scanned the street, half expecting to see Victor's sleek black car waiting, but there was nothing. Maybe he'd been bluffing. Maybe this was all some elaborate, twisted joke. Then a voice behind her said, "This way." She spun around. A man stood there, tall, built like he lived in a gym, wearing a suit that marked him as one of Victor's people. He nodded toward a black SUV parked at the curb, engine running. "I can walk home," Lena said, hating how her voice shook. "No," the man said simply. "You can't." What choice did she have? She climbed into the SUV's back seat, and the man got in beside her. The driver pulled into traffic without a word. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Mr. Kane's office." "I thought he was picking me up." Change of plans. They drove for 20 minutes, heading north into a part of the city Lena rarely visited. The buildings got nicer, the streets cleaner. Eventually, they pulled up in front of a high-rise that gleamed in the afternoon sun. The man escorted her through a lobby that looked like something from a magazine, into an elevator that required a key card to access the top floor. Victor's office could have housed her entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The furniture was modern, expensive, brutal in its simplicity. Victor stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in what sounded like Russian. When he saw her, he ended the call without saying goodbye. "You came," he said. "Didn't seem like I had a choice." "You always have a choice, Lena, but some choices are smarter than others." He gestured to a leather chair facing his desk. "Sit." She sat, felt small in the massive chair, which was probably the point. Victor moved around the desk, leaning against it casually. "I need you to understand the situation you're in. I understand you think I'm in danger because you decided to make me your regular conversation partner at breakfast. It's not about what I think, it's about what they know." He pulled up something on his computer, turned the monitor toward her. More photos. Lena at the grocery store. Lena at the laundromat. Lena meeting her friend Sarah for drinks 2 weeks ago. They've been watching you for a month, maybe longer, building a file, waiting for the right moment. Who's they? The Volkov organization, Russian mob, based out of the South Side. We've been at war for the better part of a year. I've cost them money, territory, people. They want revenge. Lena stared at the photos, nausea rising in her throat. "You brought this to me. Whatever this is, it's because of you." Yes. The simple admission somehow made it worse. "So fix it. Tell them I'm nobody, that I don't matter." "I could do that," Victor said, "but they wouldn't believe me. And even if they did, they've already invested resources in watching you. They won't just walk away. They'll use you to send a message." "What kind of message?" He didn't answer. Didn't need to. The silence said enough. Lena pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to think. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to let me protect you." "How? By sticking me in some safe house somewhere, hiding me away while you do whatever it is you do?" "No, by keeping you close, making it clear that you're under my protection, that touching you means war." "Sounds like there's already war." "There's conflict," Victor corrected. "War is different. War is total, and that's what they'll get if they hurt you." Lena dropped her hands, looking at him directly. "Why me? You're telling me in 6 months of casual flirting, I became important enough to start a war over?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I don't have many weaknesses, Lena. I've built my life to eliminate vulnerabilities, but you—" He shook his head. "You were supposed to be nothing. A distraction. Somewhere I could go twice a week and pretend to be normal. Just a guy getting coffee from a pretty waitress who gave as good as she got. But I started looking forward to it. Started thinking about what you'd say, how you'd react. Started watching you when you weren't watching me." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The Volkovs noticed before I did. That's insane. That's honest." Lena stood up, needing to move. She walked to the window, looked down at the city spreading out below. From up here, everything looked clean, organized, nothing like the messy reality she knew. "I can't do this. I can't be part of whatever sick world you live in. You're already part of it. Then I'll leave, tonight. I'll go somewhere they can't find me. They'll find you, and without me there to stop them, you'll disappear. No body, no trace, just another missing person that Chicago PD barely bothers to investigate." She turned to face him. "You don't know that." "Yes," Victor said quietly. "I do, because I've done it myself." The words hung in the air like poison. Lena felt her breath catch. "You've killed people. Many people. And you think that's supposed to make me trust you?" "I think it's supposed to make you understand who I am, what I'm capable of." He moved closer, not threatening, just present. "I've done terrible things, Lena. I'm not asking you to forgive them or forget them, But the same skills that make me dangerous to my enemies make me useful to you right now. I can keep you alive. I will keep you alive. Why? Why do you even care? Because he stopped, started again. Because for 6 months, you've been the only real thing in my life. Everything else is calculation, strategy, power plays and negotiations and violence. But you? You didn't know who I was, didn't want anything from me. You just smiled and poured coffee and made terrible jokes about my tie. My jokes aren't terrible. They're awful, he said. And for just a second, there was a flash of the man she'd thought she knew. The one who traded barbs over eggs and toast. But they made me feel human, and I'm not ready to lose that yet. Lena wanted to say something cutting, something that would put distance between them, make this all less real. But looking at him now, seeing past the expensive suit and the cold exterior to whatever was underneath, she couldn't find the words. What happens now? She asked instead. Now I take you home. You pack what you need, and you stay with me until this is over. Stay with you where? I have a penthouse, top floor of a building I own. Security, privacy, everything you need. A golden cage. A safe cage, he corrected. But yes, a cage nonetheless. Lena closed her eyes. Thought about her apartment with its leaky faucet and thin walls. Thought about Rosie's diner and her regular customers. Thought about the life she'd built, small and unremarkable as it was. And if I say no? Then I'll have my people watch you as best they can, but I can't guarantee your safety. And when something happens, not if, when, you'll wish you'd made a different choice. It wasn't really a choice, not in any meaningful way. But Lena found herself nodding anyway. How long? However long it takes. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Victor's driver took them to Lena's apartment in the old SUV, trailing a second vehicle that she tried not to think too hard about. The neighborhood looked different now, seeing it through the lens of danger. Every shadow held potential threat. Every parked car could be hiding someone. You lived here for how long? Victor asked, looking up at the building with barely concealed disdain. 3 years? It's cheap. It's a death trap. Not everyone gets to live in penthouses, Lena said sharply. He didn't argue, just followed her up the 4 flights. The elevator had been broken since January, and waited while she unlocked her door. The apartment looked smaller with him in it, more pathetic. She saw it through his eyes, the secondhand furniture, the prints she'd bought at Target trying to make the walls less depressing, the art supplies stacked in one corner that represented dreams she couldn't quite afford to chase. I'll just be a minute, she said, moving toward the bedroom. Take your time. She grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started throwing in clothes, jeans, sweaters, underwear, which felt weirdly intimate even though Victor wasn't watching. Her toothbrush from the bathroom, the sketchbook she'd been working in, the charcoal pencils that had cost her half a week's tips. When she came back out, Victor was standing at her makeshift art corner, holding one of her drawings. It was a street scene from the neighborhood, old Mrs. Chen from downstairs feeding pigeons, morning light catching the broken glass in the alley. You did this? He asked. Yeah, it's nothing, just, it's good, really good. Something in his voice made her defensive. I'm not looking for compliments. Good, I'm not giving them. I'm stating fact. He set the drawing down carefully. You have real talent, Lena. Why are you wasting it slinging coffee? Because talent doesn't pay rent, and art classes cost money I don't have. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but the words were interrupted by a sound from outside. A crash, followed by shouting. Then an alarm started wailing, the building's fire alarm, ancient and ear-splitting. Victor's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The casual observer vanished, replaced by something cold and lethal. He pulled a gun from inside his jacket. When had he been carrying a gun? And moved to the window. Stay back, he ordered. Lena's heart was hammering. What's happening? Fire, ground floor, spreading fast. How do you know it's spreading? He didn't answer, just pulled out his phone and barked orders at whoever answered. Then he turned to her. We're leaving. Now. There's no time to... Leave everything. Move. She grabbed her duffel and followed him into the hallway. Smoke was already rising up the stairwell, thick and black. People were emerging from apartments, confused, scared. Old Mrs. Chen was shuffling toward the stairs, and Lena started toward her, but Victor grabbed her arm. My people will help her. You're with me. I can't just... You can. You will. He pulled her toward the fire escape at the end of the hall. The window was stuck, painted shut years ago, but Victor kicked it hard enough that the frame splintered. Cold air rushed in, along with the smell of gasoline. This wasn't an accident, Lena said, the realization hitting her like a fist. No. This was a message. Victor helped her through the window onto the metal platform. Below, the alley was filling with smoke. Above, the building stretched up another 2 floors. Can you climb? Yes, I think so. Don't think, do. They went up instead of down. Victor moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, testing each handhold before trusting his weight to it. Lena followed, her hands shaking, trying not to look down at the growing flames below. They made it to the roof just as the first sirens reached the street. Victor's phone rang. He answered without taking his eyes off the building's perimeter. Status? Lena couldn't hear the response, but she saw Victor's jaw tighten. Get everyone out, he said. I don't care what it costs. No casualties. He ended the call and looked at Lena. The building's clear. Everyone made it out. My home, she said. The words felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Everything I own is down there. You're alive. That's what matters. Is it? Because right now it feels like my life just burned up with my apartment. He moved closer, and there was something in his eyes that might have been regret. I'm sorry. I should have moved faster, should have anticipated. Don't, Lena cut him off. Don't apologize like you're not the reason this happened. You brought this to my door. You and your war and your enemies who apparently think burning down buildings is an acceptable way to make a point. You're right. The simple admission deflated her anger. She'd expected arguments, justifications. Instead, he just stood there, soot-streaked and armed, accepting responsibility like it was just another weight to carry. A helicopter appeared over the neighboring building. Not police. Something private. It circled once before landing on the roof, and a man in black tactical gear jumped out, gesturing for them to board. Your chariot, Victor said dryly. Lena stared at the helicopter, then back at the building below, flames now visible through multiple windows. Her building. Her life. Everything she'd worked for the last 3 years going up in smoke because she'd flirted with the wrong man. But Victor was right about one thing. She was alive. She climbed into the helicopter. The helicopter cut through Chicago's skyline as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Lena too much of the flames she'd just escaped. She pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching her neighborhood shrink below. Fire trucks surrounded her building now, their lights flashing uselessly. Too late to save anything that mattered. Victor sat across from her, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid-fire Russian again. His voice was hard, clipped, each word landing like a hammer. When he finally ended the call, the silence in the cabin felt heavy enough to crush. They got everyone out, he said. Mrs. Chen, the family on the 3rd floor. Everyone. Minor smoke inhalation for a couple people, but no serious injuries. Lena didn't look at him. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to be the truth. The truth is my entire life just burned to the ground because you decided I was worth protecting. The truth, Victor said, his voice dropping lower, is that your life was already in danger the moment the Volkovs identified you as a potential target. The fire just made it visible. She finally turned to face him. His suit was ruined, streaked with soot and ash. There was a cut above his left eyebrow that he hadn't bothered to acknowledge. Blood dried at the temple. He looked dangerous and exhausted in equal measure. How long were you planning to keep this from me? She asked. That I was being watched, that I was in danger. I wasn't keeping it from you. I found out this morning. Bullshit. You said they'd been watching me for a month. They had. I discovered it this morning. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I have people who monitor threats against my organization. They flagged the surveillance 3 hours before I showed up at the diner. I came to warn you immediately. How noble. It wasn't noble. It was necessary. His jaw tightened. You want me to apologize for caring whether you live or die? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that 6 months of coffee and conversation made you matter to me. I'm sorry that my enemies are smart enough to notice. I'm sorry that your building is burning because I didn't move fast enough, but I'm not sorry that I'm keeping you alive. The helicopter began its descent. Below, A building rose from the Gold Coast like a glass and steel monument to wealth Lena couldn't begin to comprehend. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset she'd forgotten she was wearing, announcing their arrival. They landed on the roof. Victor's bodyguard, the same man who'd collected her from the diner, though she still didn't know his name, was waiting with two others, all armed, all watching the surrounding rooftops like they expected sniper fire at any moment. "Clear?" Victor asked. "Clear, sir." "Buildings locked down. No unauthorized access since 0600. Victor nodded and gestured for Lena to follow. They took a private elevator that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan. The descent was smooth, silent, and ended at a set of double doors that opened into what could only be described as obscene luxury. The penthouse was all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a view of the city that made Lena feel like she was floating above reality. The furniture was modern and minimal, the kind of expensive that didn't need to show off. Everything was in shades of gray and black and white, clinical in its perfection. "Guest room is down the hall, second door on the left," Victor said, shrugging out of his ruined jacket. "You'll find clothes in the closet. I had someone stock it this afternoon." Lena stared at him. "You had someone stock a closet with clothes for me before you even knew if I'd agree to come here?" "I knew you'd agree. You're smart enough to recognize when you don't have a choice." "That's not the same as agreeing." "No," he acknowledged. "It's not." She wanted to throw something at him. The smug certainty in his voice, the way he'd orchestrated all of this, like she was just another piece on his chessboard. But she was too tired, too overwhelmed by everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. So instead, she just picked up her duffel bag, the only thing she owned now, and walked down the hall. The guest room was bigger than her entire apartment had been. The bed could have slept 4 people comfortably. The closet Victor had mentioned was actually a walk-in that contained more clothes than she'd owned in her entire life. Jeans in her exact size, sweaters, blouses, even pajamas. Everything still had tags attached. She grabbed a set of sleep clothes and headed for the bathroom. The shower had multiple heads and controls she didn't understand, but she managed to get hot water running. She stood under the spray for a long time, watching ash and soot swirl down the drain, trying not to think about how the smell of smoke had embedded itself in her hair, her skin, her lungs. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that probably cost more than her weekly paycheck, she found a bag sitting on the bed that hadn't been there before. Inside were her art supplies, the sketchbook and charcoals she'd thrown in her duffel, but also tubes of paint, new brushes, a portable easel, professional grade paper. Thousands of dollars worth of materials she'd never been able to afford. She found Victor in the kitchen, standing at the counter with a tumbler of amber liquid that was definitely not coffee. He changed into dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The cut above his eyebrow had been cleaned but not bandaged. "You went back," Lena said, holding up one of the paint tubes, "to my apartment before the fire spread. I had someone retrieve what they could from your art corner. Most of it survived." He took a drink. "Consider it an apology for destroying everything else." "I don't want your guilt gifts." "Then consider it an investment. You said talent doesn't pay rent. Maybe it's time to find out if that's true." Lena set the paint tube down on the counter harder than necessary. "I don't need you to save me, Victor. Not from fires, not from poverty, not from my own choices." "No," he agreed. "You need me to keep you alive. Everything else is optional." "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you're trying to buy me. Fancy penthouse, expensive clothes, art supplies I've been dreaming about for years. What's next? A car? Jewelry? A nice little bank account so I'll forget that you ruined my life?" His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something that looked almost like hurt before it disappeared behind his usual mask. "You think that's what this is?" "I don't know what this is. That's the problem." He set his glass down, moved closer. Not threatening, just present in a way that made the kitchen feel smaller. "This is me trying to mitigate the damage my existence has caused to yours. You lost your home today because of me. I can't give it back, but I can give you tools, resources, a chance to do something more than survive. And what do you get out of it? The satisfaction of knowing you're not just safe, but equipped to build whatever life you want when this is over." "When this is over," Lena repeated. "You keep saying that like it's inevitable, like there's an end point." "There is. Either the Volkovs back down, or I eliminate them as a threat. Either way, the war ends. And how many people die in the meantime? Victor's silence was answer enough. Lena turned away, staring out at the city lights. From up here, Chicago looked peaceful. Beautiful, even. All the ugliness hidden by distance and darkness. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. I don't know how to be the person someone starts a war over. You don't have to be anyone except yourself. That's what made you a target in the first place. He paused. The Volkovs expected me to have weakness hidden somewhere. A mistress, maybe. Someone I kept locked away, pampered and protected. Instead, they found a waitress who didn't know who I was, who treated me like I was normal. That confused them, made them wonder what you knew that made you valuable. But I don't know anything. Exactly. Which means they'll have to work harder to figure out what I'm protecting. And in the meantime, I get to keep you safe. Lena turned back to face him. You're using me as bait. I'm using the situation to my advantage, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and whatever he saw there made his expression go cold. I need to take this. Don't leave the penthouse. Don't go near the windows after dark. And don't open the door for anyone except me or Mikhail. Who's Mikhail? The man who brought you to my office, my head of security. He was already moving toward his office. There's food in the kitchen. Help yourself to anything. Then he was gone, and Lena was alone in a penthouse that cost more per month than she'd earned in a year, wearing borrowed clothes, surrounded by guilt gifts, trying to figure out how her life had gone from ordinary to insane in less than 12 hours. She raided the kitchen out of spite more than hunger, found imported cheese and crackers that probably cost more than her grocery budget, ate them standing at the counter, washing them down with water from the tap because she refused to open the bottle of wine she'd spotted in the fridge. She wasn't going to drink his expensive alcohol, wasn't going to make herself comfortable in his world. But when she finally went back to the guest room, she couldn't help pulling out the new sketchbook. The paper was thick, textured, the kind she'd only ever touched in art stores when no one was watching. She opened to the first page, picked up a piece of charcoal, and started drawing. The image that emerged was her building, not as it had been in life, but as it burned. Flames eating through windows, smoke billowing into the April sky. She drew Mrs. Chen on the sidewalk, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, watching her home die. Drew the firefighters who'd arrived too late. Drew the shadows of people she'd lived near for 3 years, but never really known. She was adding the last details when she heard footsteps in the hall. Victor appeared in the doorway, jacket back on, keys in hand. I need to go out, he said. Mikhail will be here. You'll be safe. Where are you going? To have a conversation with some people who need reminding of the rules. The way he said it made Lena's stomach tighten. Victor, don't. He cut her off. Don't ask me not to do what needs to be done. You don't want that responsibility. And you do? I've been carrying it for 10 years. What's one more night? He glanced at her sketchbook, at the drawing of the burning building. Something flickered across his face. You're angry. I'm furious. Good. Angry people fight back. Scared people just hide and hope. He turned to leave, then paused. I meant what I said earlier, about your talent. When this is over, you should do something with it. Something real. Like what? Draw pretty pictures for your office? Like whatever the hell you want. You're good enough that you get to choose. Then he was gone again, and Lena was left staring at her drawing, at the evidence of destruction rendered in charcoal and fury, wondering what it said about her that she'd drawn it at all. She didn't see Victor again that night. Mikhail appeared around 10, did a sweep of the penthouse, and positioned himself in the living room with a laptop and what looked like a substantial weapons cache. He didn't speak to her, and she didn't speak to him. Just went back to her borrowed room and lay in the expensive bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to sleep and failing. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, she heard the elevator doors open. Footsteps, quiet conversation in Russian, then silence. She got up, crept to her door, and opened it just enough to see into the living room. Victor was back. His jacket was gone again, his white shirt no longer white. There was blood on his hands. Not his own, she thought, though she couldn't be sure. Mikhail was speaking to him in low, urgent tones, gesturing toward something Lena couldn't see. Victor's response was brief. Mikhail nodded and disappeared toward the kitchen. Victor just stood there for a moment, alone in his pristine penthouse, covered in evidence of violence Lena could only imagine. Then he looked up, directly at her door, and she realized he'd known she was watching the entire time. Their eyes met across the distance. She should have looked away, should have closed the door and pretended she'd never seen. Instead, she just stood there, holding his gaze, watching him watch her. Finally, he was the one who looked away. He headed toward what she assumed was his bedroom, and she heard the sound of a door closing, water running. She went back to bed but didn't sleep, just lay there listening to the sounds of the penthouse settling around her, wondering what kind of conversation required that much blood. Morning came too early. Lena woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover, her body stiff from tension she hadn't been able to release. She found coffee already made in the kitchen, along with a note in angular handwriting. Had to handle some things. Back by noon. Emma's here if you need anything. She poured coffee into a mug that probably cost more than her security deposit had, carried it to the windows, and looked out at the city. From up here, she could see the south side. Could probably see the neighborhood where her building had been, though she didn't let herself look for the smoke. Her phone buzzed. She'd forgotten she still had it, forgotten it had survived in her duffel bag. The screen showed 17 missed calls from Rosie, 6 from Sarah, and a string of texts that ranged from concerned to panicked. She called Rosie first. "Lena, thank Christ. I've been trying to reach you since last night. Are you okay? I heard about the fire, saw it on the news. Your building was—" "I'm fine," Lena interrupted. "I got out. Everyone got out. Where are you now? Do you need a place to stay? You can crash at my place. It's not much, but I'm staying with a friend. I'm safe, Rosie, I promise." "What friend? You never mentioned—" "It's complicated. I'll explain when I can, but I'm okay." "Really?" Rosie didn't sound convinced, but she let it drop. "You need anything? You call me. Anytime, day or night. You understand?" "I understand. Thank you." The call with Sarah was harder. Sarah had known Lena since college, had been there through the worst of her early 20s when money was even tighter and hope even scarcer. She'd know Lena was lying the moment she tried. "Where are you?" Sarah demanded before Lena could even say hello. "I went by your building this morning. They're not letting anyone in. The whole place is condemned. Lena, what the hell happened?" "There was a fire. I don't know how it started." "Bullshit! The news is saying it was arson, that someone deliberately torched the ground floor. Who would do that?" "I don't know." "Lena, I really don't know, Sarah. And I can't talk about it right now. I just needed to let you know I'm alive and safe." "Safe where?" "With someone who can help." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have right now." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Sarah said quietly, "You're scaring me." "I'm scaring myself," Lena admitted. "But I promise I'll explain everything when I can. Just trust me for now?" "I always trust you. That's not the problem. The problem is you never ask for help, and now you won't even tell me what's going on." "I know. I'm sorry. I have to go." She ended the call before Sarah could protest, then immediately felt guilty. But what was she supposed to say? That she was hiding in a mobster's penthouse because she'd accidentally made herself a target by flirting with the wrong man? That her life had turned into something out of a crime novel, except the violence was real and the fear was suffocating, and she didn't know how to make any of it stop? Mikhail appeared in the kitchen doorway. Up close, Lena could see he was probably in his 40s, with a face that had seen too many fights and eyes that missed nothing. "You need something?" he asked in heavily accented English. "Information," Lena said. "What happened last night, after Victor left?" "Mr. Kane had business to handle." "What kind of business requires coming home covered in blood?" Mikhail's expression didn't change. "The kind you don't ask about." "I'm asking anyway." He studied her for a long moment, like he was trying to decide whether she was brave or stupid. Finally, he said, "The people who burned your building needed to understand that actions have consequences. Mr. Kane explained it to them." "Explained how?" "Thoroughly." The word landed like a stone. Lena set her coffee down, her hands suddenly unsteady. "Did he kill anyone?" "You really want to know?" "Yes." "No," Mikhail said. "He didn't. But he made sure they understood what would happen if they tried again. Sometimes the threat is more effective than the execution." "You sound like you're quoting him." I've worked for Mr. Kane for 8 years. You learn to think like him after a while. Lena moved to the windows again, needing space. How does someone end up doing what he does? What you do? Different reasons. Different paths. Mikhail leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You want to know about Mr. Kane specifically? Would you tell me if I asked? Some of it. The parts that matter. He paused. He was 17 when his father died. Car bomb meant for someone else, but the result was the same. His mother followed 6 months later. Heart attack, officially, but everyone knew it was grief. Victor inherited his father's debts, his father's enemies, and his father's territory. Most people expected him to fold, sell everything, run, maybe end up dead in an alley before his 18th birthday. But he didn't. No, he learned fast, studied the people his father had dealt with, figured out their weaknesses, their patterns. By the time he was 20, he'd consolidated power in ways his father never managed. By 25, he controlled more of the city than anyone since the Prohibition era. Mikhail's voice held something that might have been respect. He's not a good man, Miss Voss, but he's a smart one, and he takes care of the people under his protection. Is that what I am now? Under his protection? You're more than that. You're the first person he's brought here in the 8 years I've known him, the first one he's let see where he lives, how he lives. That means something. It means I'm leverage, Lena said bitterly. If that's all you were, he would have stashed you in a safe house on the outskirts of the city. Instead, he brought you to the most secure location he owns and gave you access to his private space. That's not how you treat leverage. That's how you treat someone who matters. The elevator doors opened before Lena could respond. Victor stepped out, looking substantially better than he had the night before. Clean suit, no blood, though there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept any better than she had. Mikhail, he said by way of greeting. Status? All quiet. No movements on the Volkov side since last night. Good. Keep monitoring. Victor's gaze shifted to Lena. We need to talk. Mikhail took that as his cue to disappear. Lena stayed by the windows, maintaining distance. About what? About what happens next? Victor moved to the kitchen, poured himself coffee with the efficiency of routine. The conversation I had last night bought us time, but not much. Maybe a week before they regroup and try something else. What kind of something else? Nothing as crude as another fire. They know I'll be expecting it now. He took a drink, grimaced like the coffee offended him. They'll try something subtle, indirect. Maybe go after someone you care about to draw you out. Lena's blood went cold. Sarah, my friend Sarah. Already being watched, discreetly. She won't notice, and neither will anyone planning to use her. You can't just put surveillance on my friends without asking. I can, Victor said calmly. And I did. Because keeping you safe means keeping the people you care about safe. Otherwise, you'll do something stupid like leave here to protect them, and then we're all in a worse position. He wasn't wrong, which made it more infuriating. What else? Rosie, your boss, she's being watched too. Same with the regular customers at the diner who might notice you're missing. He set his coffee down. I know it feels invasive. It is invasive, but it's necessary. Everything you do is necessary, isn't it? Every violation, every manipulation, all just part of keeping people safe. Yes, Victor said simply. That's exactly what it is. Lena wanted to argue, but the exhaustion was catching up to her. The adrenaline from the fire had burned off, leaving only the reality of her situation. She was trapped in a penthouse with a man who killed people as part of his business model, dependent on his protection, surrounded by luxury that felt like a cage. I need air, she said. I need to get out of here. Not possible. I'm not asking for permission. Then I'm denying a demand. Victor's voice hardened. The only reason you're alive right now is because you're here, in the most secure location I control. The moment you step outside, you become a target again. So what? I'm just supposed to stay locked in here indefinitely? Until I resolve the situation? Yes. Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what the worst part is? I actually believed you when you said I had a choice. When you said I could leave if I wanted to. But that was a lie, wasn't it? I never had a choice. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're right. You don't have a choice about being here, but you do have a choice about how you spend the time. You can be angry and miserable, or you can use the resources I'm offering and do something productive with them. Like what? Paint pretty pictures while people die because of me? Like create something that matters. Like prove you're more than just a victim of circumstances you didn't choose. He moved closer, and there was something in his eyes that looked almost like vulnerability. I've spent 10 years building an empire out of violence and fear. You have a chance to build something better. Don't waste it being bitter. That's rich coming from you. Who better to understand wasted potential? He turned toward his office. I have work to do. Mikhail will be here if you need anything. Don't do anything stupid. He disappeared into his office, leaving Lena alone with her anger and her fear, and the uncomfortable realization that he might actually be right. She spent the rest of the day in the guest room, alternating between sketching and pacing and trying not to think about how her entire world had been reduced to borrowed space in a criminal's home. The art supplies Victor had given her sat in the corner, untouched except for the charcoal she'd used the night before. Looking at them made her furious and grateful in equal measure, which only made everything more confusing. Around 7, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Victor standing there, still in his suit but with the tie loosened, looking as tired as she felt. "Dinner," he said. "I ordered from an Italian place. It's better than anything I could cook, and I thought you might be hungry." "I'm not." "Lena," I said, "I'm not hungry." He studied her face, and something in his expression softened. "I know you hate this. I know you hate me. But you still need to eat." "Why do you care?" "Because I'm responsible for you now, whether you like it or not." He paused. "Please, just eat something. If not for yourself, then to save me the guilt of watching you waste away out of spite." Despite everything, that almost made her smile. "You don't strike me as someone who wastes time on guilt." "Then you don't know me as well as you think you do." She followed him to the kitchen, where he'd set out containers of pasta and bread and salad. They ate in silence for a while, the tension between them thick enough to choke on. But the food was good, and she realized she actually was hungry, and slowly some of the anger drained away, leaving only exhaustion. "How long has it been?" she asked finally. "Since you brought someone here." Victor looked up from his plate. "Never. You're the first." Mikhail said, "Mikhail talks too much." But there was no heat in it. "I bought this place 5 years ago. It was supposed to be neutral ground. Somewhere I could go and not have to be who I am everywhere else in this city. Bringing someone here defeats the purpose." "Then why did you bring me?" "Because everywhere else felt too much like hiding you. And I didn't want you to feel hidden." The answer caught her off guard. She set her fork down, studying him across the table. "I don't understand you." "Good. That makes 2 of us." Despite everything, Lena felt something shift. Not forgiveness, she wasn't ready for that. But maybe the beginning of understanding, or at least the acknowledgement that the situation was more complicated than she'd wanted to believe. "Tell me something," she said. "If you could go back before all of this started, would you still come to the diner?" Victor was quiet for a long time, then, "Yes, every time, even knowing where it would lead." "Why?" "Because for 6 months, twice a week, I got to be normal. And that was worth whatever comes after." Lena didn't have an answer to that. So she just went back to her pasta, and Victor went back to his, and they finished dinner in a sequence that felt less hostile and more like 2 people trying to figure out how to exist in the same impossible space. 3 days passed in a strange kind of limbo. Lena learned the rhythms of the penthouse. Victor leaving before dawn, the sound of Mikhail's boots in the hallway, the quiet hum of the city 40 floors below. She painted because there was nothing else to do, because keeping her hands busy kept her mind from spiraling. The canvases piled up in the corner of the guest room, each one darker than the last. Victor kept his distance mostly, appearing for meals like some kind of ghost, who only materialized when food was involved. They didn't talk much. What was there to say? But on the 4th morning, Lena woke to find him in the kitchen at 6 a.m., still in yesterday's clothes, staring at a laptop screen with an intensity that made her pause in the doorway. "You sleep at all?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Sleep's optional." "That's not how biology works." "Tell that to the Volkovs." He finally lifted his gaze, and Lena could see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "They hit one of my shipments last night, took out 3 of my men." The casual way he said it made her stomach turn. "Dead?" "2 in the hospital. One went home with a concussion and a story he'll be telling for years." Victor closed the laptop. Could have been worse. They were sending a message, not trying to start a bloodbath. What message? That they're not backing down. He stood, moved to the coffee maker. I miscalculated. Thought the warning I gave them would buy us more time, but they're more desperate than I realized. Lena moved into the kitchen, drawn by something she couldn't name. Curiosity, maybe. Or the need to understand the man who'd upended her entire world. What happens now? Now I escalate. He poured coffee with hands that were perfectly steady despite the exhaustion. They want war? They'll get it, but on my terms. More people are going to die. Yes. The simplicity of the answer was somehow worse than any justification would have been. Lena leaned against the counter, watching him. How do you live with it? Knowing that people die because of decisions you make? Victor was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee like it held answers. You want the truth or the version that makes me sound less like a monster? Truth. I don't think about it. Can't afford to. The moment I start questioning every choice, weighing every life, I become ineffective. And in this world, ineffective means dead. He looked at her directly. But if you're asking if it bothers me, if I lie awake at night counting bodies, the answer is yes, every single one. Then why do it? Because the alternative is worse. I didn't choose this life, Lena. I inherited it, and by the time I was old enough to walk away, I had 300 people depending on me for their livelihoods. Families, kids who needed food and rent money and a future that didn't involve getting gunned down in the street. You think I can just abandon that? You could go legitimate, use your money, your influence, and leave a power vacuum that gets filled by someone worse than me? He shook his head. I've thought about it, spent years thinking about it. But every time I run the numbers, map out the scenarios, it ends the same way. People die. More people than if I stay and maintain control. Lena wanted to argue, to point out the flaws in his logic, but she couldn't. Because somewhere in the twisted arithmetic of his world, he might actually be right. That's a convenient way to justify never changing. It's the reality I live in. He set his coffee down, moved closer. You think I like this? You think I enjoy being the person people fear? I'm 32 years old, Lena. Most people my age are worried about mortgages and whether they'll make partner. I'm worried about which of my enemies will try to kill me this week. You could have walked away from the diner. From me. Before any of this started. Yeah, he said quietly. I could have, should have, but I didn't want to. The admission hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them was ready to explore. Before Lena could respond, Mikhail's voice cut through the tension. Mr. Kane, we have a problem. Victor's entire demeanor shifted, exhaustion replaced by cold focus. What kind of problem? The Volkovs made contact. They want to meet. When? Tonight, neutral ground. They're proposing Dimitri's. Victor's jaw tightened. That's not neutral ground. Dimitri owes them money. I know, which is why I told them to pick somewhere else. And? They said it's Dimitri's or nothing. You don't show. They consider it an admission of weakness. Lena watched the exchange, trying to follow the subtext. This is a trap, she said. Even I can see that. Of course it's a trap, Victor said. The question is what kind? He turned to Mikhail. Get me everything we have on Dimitri's. Layout, exits, sight lines. I want to know every possible way this goes wrong. Already on it. Mikhail hesitated. You're really going? Don't have a choice. I don't show, they'll interpret it as fear. Word gets out that I'm afraid, and every two-bit crew in the city will think they can take a shot at me. So you walk into a trap to prove you're not scared? Lena heard herself say. That's insane. That's leadership. Victor was already moving toward his office. Mikhail, I want 4 teams positioned around the perimeter. Nothing obvious, but ready to move if things go sideways. And get Alexei on the phone. I need to know what the Volkovs have been buying lately. Mikhail nodded and disappeared. Lena followed Victor into his office, unable to stop herself. You can't seriously be considering this. I'm not considering it. I'm doing it. He pulled up a map on his computer, studying it with the focus of a general planning a battle. Dimitri's is in Volkov territory, which means they'll be comfortable. Overconfident, probably. That gives me an advantage. Or gets you killed. Possibly. He glanced at her. You worried about me? I'm worried about what happens to me if you die. Don't pretend this is about sentiment. But something in his expression suggested he didn't quite believe her. And the worst part was that Lena wasn't sure she believed herself either. Somewhere in the last 4 days, the lines had started blurring. Victor wasn't just the dangerous man who destroyed her life anymore. He was also the person who'd saved her art supplies from a burning building, who brought her dinner when she forgot to eat, who looked at her paintings like they mattered. I'll be fine, he said, turning back to the map. I've walked into worse situations and walked back out. Name one. 3 years ago, the Bratva tried to muscle in on my territory, set up a meeting to discuss terms, then had 16 men waiting to ambush me. I went in alone, walked out with a treaty that's held ever since. How? By being smarter than they expected and more ruthless than they were prepared for. He zoomed in on a section of the map. The Volkovs aren't the Bratva. They're sloppier, more emotional. They'll make mistakes. Lena moved closer, looking at the screen. Dimitri's appeared to be a restaurant, 2 stories, lots of windows. What if they don't make mistakes? What if this is the one time everything goes exactly according to their plan? Victor looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression softened. Then Mikhail will get you somewhere safe. I've already made arrangements. I don't want arrangements. I want... She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. What did she want? For him to not go? For this entire situation to be different? For her life to go back to normal, even though normal had been grinding poverty and unfulfilled dreams? You want me to be careful, Victor finished for her. I will be. I promise. Your promises don't mean much when you're walking into a trap. They're all I've got to offer. He held her gaze, and Lena felt something shift in her chest. Fear, yes, but also something else. Something that felt dangerously close to caring whether this man lived or died, independent of what it meant for her own survival. This is stupid, she said, but the words came out softer than she intended. Most of what I do is stupid. You get used to it. He went back to his planning, and Lena went back to the guest room, trying to convince herself that the knot in her stomach was just anxiety about her own situation and nothing more. The rest of the day crawled by. Victor spent hours in his office, door closed, voice occasionally rising in Russian, as he coordinated whatever nightmare scenario he was walking into. Mikhail came and went, each time looking grimmer. Around 4, 2 more men showed up, both armed, both wearing the same expression of controlled tension that Mikhail wore. Lena tried to paint but couldn't focus, tried to read one of the books from Victor's shelf but couldn't make the words stick. Finally, she just sat by the window and watched the city, trying not to think about what tonight might bring. At 6, Victor emerged from his office wearing a different suit, this one dark enough to hide bloodstains. The thought made Lena's stomach turn. You're really doing this, she said. I'm really doing this. He was checking a gun, movements efficient and practiced. The casual way he handled the weapon should have terrified her. Instead, it just made everything feel more real. What do I do if you don't come back? Mikhail has instructions. He'll take you somewhere safe, set you up with new identification, enough money to start over somewhere the Volkovs can't reach you. That's not what I asked. Victor looked up from the gun. What are you asking, Lena? She didn't know. Didn't have words for the tangle of fear and anger and something else that had been building in her chest for days. Just come back, she said finally. Don't make me spend the rest of my life wondering what happened. I'll come back. He holstered the gun, moved closer. I've survived a lot worse than a meeting with some desperate Russians. You don't know that. No, he admitted. But I'm choosing to believe it anyway. Then he was gone, taking Mikhail and the 2 other men with him, leaving Lena alone in the penthouse with instructions not to go near the windows and an emergency number she was supposed to call if anything went wrong. The next 3 hours were the longest of Lena's life. She paced, made coffee she didn't drink, started a painting and abandoned it. The silence of the penthouse pressed down on her, broken only by the ticking of a clock she hadn't noticed before and the distant sounds of the city below. At 9:30, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Things got complicated. Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone. The message should have been reassuring. At least he was alive to send it. But the word complicated covered a lot of territory, none of it good. At 10:15, she heard the elevator. Her heart jumped, but she forced herself to wait, to not rush out like some worried girlfriend in a bad movie. She wasn't that. Didn't want to be that. But when Victor walked into the living room, she was there anyway. He was bleeding. Not badly. A cut above his left eye, another on his cheekbone, but enough that her stomach dropped. His suit jacket was gone. His shirt torn at the shoulder. But he was walking, talking into his phone in rapid Russian, and most importantly, alive. He saw her and ended the call. "You're bleeding," Lena said, because stating the obvious seemed safer than any of the other things she wanted to say. "It's not mine. Mostly." He moved past her toward the bathroom. "I need to clean up." "What happened?" "Later. Right now I need to make sure none of this is serious." Lena followed him into the bathroom, watching as he stripped off his shirt and examined the damage in the mirror. There were bruises blooming across his ribs, a nasty scrape on his shoulder, and the cuts on his face that were still bleeding sluggishly. "You said you'd be careful," she said. "I was. You should see the other guys." He started cleaning the facial cuts with efficiency that suggested he'd done this many times before. The meeting was going fine until it wasn't. They tried to take me in the parking lot on the way out. 4 men, maybe 5. Hard to count when you're busy not dying. "And you fought them off alone?" Mikhail was there. The others provided cover fire from their positions. He winced as antiseptic hit the cut. "We got out. They didn't." The casual way he said it made Lena's blood run cold. "You killed them. They were trying to kill me. I returned the favor." He met her eyes in the mirror. "You want me to apologize for surviving?" "I want you to—" She stopped, not sure what she wanted. For him to be different? For the violence to mean something instead of just being another Tuesday night? "I want this to be over." "So do I." He turned to face her, and the exhaustion was back in his eyes, heavier than before. But it's not. If anything, it just got worse. How is that possible? Because the Volkovs weren't trying to negotiate tonight. They were trying to send a message to their own people. Show that they're not afraid of me, that they can strike at me directly. He moved past her, heading for the bedroom. "I need to change. Then we need to talk about what comes next." Lena waited in the living room, her mind racing. The violence she'd been trying to ignore, trying to keep at arm's length, had just walked through the door wearing Victor's face. This was real. People had died tonight, and more would die tomorrow or the next day, or whenever the next escalation came. When Victor reappeared, he was wearing clean clothes and looked slightly more human, though the bruises on his face were already darkening. He poured himself a drink, offered her one. She took it. "The Volkovs are planning something big," he said, without preamble. "I got that much from the conversation before it went sideways. They've been buying explosives, military-grade equipment. Whatever they're planning, it's not going to be subtle. Can't you just, I don't know, call the police? Turn them in? For what? Having explosives isn't illegal if you have the right permits, and they're smart enough to have paperwork. And even if the cops could touch them, it would just delay the inevitable. Someone else would step up, take their place, and the cycle would start over. So what's your plan? End it. Permanently." He took a drink, grimaced. "I've been trying to avoid all-out war, but they're not giving me a choice. So I'm going to hit them where it hurts. Take out their revenue streams, their supply lines, their key people. Make it impossible for them to function. That's going to take time. 3, maybe 4 days if I'm efficient." He looked at her. "Which means you need to stay here, stay safe, stay out of sight. No contact with anyone outside this building. No calls, no texts, nothing that could give away your location." "I'm already a prisoner. You're just making the cage smaller." "I'm keeping you alive." His voice hardened. "After tonight, the Volkovs know I'm not backing down. That means they'll get desperate, and desperate people do desperate things." Before Lena could respond, the lights went out. The transition from bright to black was instant and absolute, the kind of darkness that came from a total power failure. Victor was moving before Lena could even process what was happening, his hand finding her arm in the darkness. "Don't move," he said quietly. "Don't make a sound." Her heart was hammering so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "What's happening?" "Either a building-wide outage or someone cut the power. Given the timing, I'm betting on the latter." "They found us?" "They found something, whether it's us specifically or just the building." He stopped. In the silence, Lena heard it too. A faint sound like metal on metal coming from somewhere above them. The roof, Victor breathed. They're coming through the roof. He pulled her toward what she thought was the bedroom, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of the space, even in total darkness. She heard a door open, felt herself being pushed into a smaller space. "Stay here," Victor said. "Don't come out unless I tell you to, or unless you hear silence for more than 10 minutes. If that happens, use the emergency exit behind the panel on the left wall. It leads to a service tunnel. Follow it to the end. It'll come out 2 blocks away. Mikhail knows the location." "Where is Mikhail?" "On his way." I triggered the alert when the power cut. He pressed something into her hand, a phone, she realized. "If I don't come back, call the number that's already dialed. Tell them Victor's package needs extraction. They'll handle the rest." "Victor, no time. Stay quiet. Stay hidden. Stay alive." Then he was gone, and Lena was alone in the darkness of what she now realized was a panic room, listening to sounds she couldn't identify and trying not to imagine all the ways this could end. She heard voices, muffled by the walls, but definitely there. Russian, harsh, and urgent. Then gunfire. Sharp cracks that made her flinch even through the reinforced walls. More voices, closer now. Something heavy hit the floor above her head. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise. Lena counted seconds, then minutes, trying to breathe quietly, her hand white-knuckled around the phone Victor had given her. At the 5-minute mark, she heard movement. At 6 minutes, someone spoke. Victor's voice, rough but alive, saying something in Russian that sounded like an order. At 7 minutes, the panic room door opened. Lena nearly screamed before she recognized Victor's silhouette against the emergency lighting that had kicked on in the hallway. He was breathing hard, and there was fresh blood on his hands, but he was standing. "It's clear," he said. "You can come out." She stepped into the hallway and immediately wished she hadn't. There were bodies, 3 of them, sprawled in positions that suggested violent ends. Victor's pristine penthouse looked like a war zone. Furniture overturned, bullet holes in the walls, glass everywhere. "They broke through the roof access," Victor said, following her gaze. "Rappelled down the side of the building, cut through the reinforced glass. They were good. I'll give them that. Just not good enough." Mikhail appeared from the stairwell, gun drawn, 2 more men behind him. He took in the scene and swore in Russian. "Where the hell were you?" Victor demanded. "They hit 3 other buildings at the same time. Diversions. By the time we figured out which one was real," he stopped. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious. The package is secure." Victor wouldn't look at Lena when he said it, like reducing her to a code word made the situation more manageable. "But we can't stay here. They know the location now." "I have a safe house prepared, 20 minutes outside the city." "No, too far, too exposed." Victor was already moving, thinking, planning. "The warehouse on Morgan Street. It's defensible, and we have supplies there." "That's a business location. If they track us there..." "They won't. It's registered under 6 layers of shell companies. Even if they dig, it'll take days to connect it to me." He finally looked at Lena. "Get what you need from the guest room. We're leaving in 5 minutes." Lena didn't argue. She grabbed her duffel, never fully unpacked, she realized now, some part of her always expecting to run, and the art supplies she'd been using. It felt absurd, taking paintings when people had just died in the next room, but they were all she had left of herself. When she came back out, the bodies were gone. She didn't ask where. Didn't want to know. They took the service elevator down to the parking garage, where 2 black SUVs were waiting with engines running. Mikhail put Lena in one, Victor in the other. "Security protocol," she heard someone say. "Don't make yourself an easy target." The drive through Chicago streets felt surreal, like watching a movie of her own life. The city she'd lived in for years suddenly felt foreign, dangerous. Every car could be a threat. Every shadow could be hiding an enemy. The warehouse on Morgan Street was exactly what it sounded like. A massive industrial building in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. But inside, Victor had created something that was part fortress, part living space. There were actual beds, a kitchen, supplies stacked in organized rows. This was a place designed for exactly this kind of emergency. "How long have we been preparing for this?" Lena asked. "I've been preparing for this my entire life," Victor said. "You've been preparing for it since the moment I walked into that diner." They set up in what passed for a living area, a section of the warehouse that had been walled off and furnished with furniture that looked like it had been salvaged from various hotels. Mikhail posted guards at every entrance, ran security checks on the perimeter. The emergency had stripped away any pretense of civility. This was war now, and everyone knew it. Lena found herself in a room that was less a bedroom and more a storage area with a cot, but it had a door and a window, barred and reinforced, but still a window. She sat on the cot, still holding her duffel bag, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. Victor appeared in the doorway. He looked worse in the fluorescent lighting, the bruises darker, the cuts more vivid, but his eyes were alert, calculating. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what? The attack? The bodies? The fact that my life is now defined by running from one secure location to another? All of it." He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him. "I thought I could control this. Thought I could keep you safe while I handled the Volkovs. I was wrong. So what now? Now I stop trying to minimize damage and start trying to end it." He sat down on the only chair, wincing as his ribs protested. "Tomorrow, I'm going to make the Volkovs an offer. They can back down and leave Chicago, or I can destroy everything they've built. Their choice. And if they choose wrong, then I follow through." He looked at her directly. "I need you to understand what that means. It means I'm going to hurt people, kill people, do things that you can't unhear or unsee or forget. And when it's over, you're going to look at me and see a monster." Lena thought about the bodies in the penthouse, the blood on Victor's hands, the casual way he talked about death like it was just another business transaction. "I think I already do," she said, "but I also see the person who saved my art supplies, who brings me dinner, who looks exhausted because he's carrying the weight of 300 families on his shoulders. Those things don't cancel each other out." "No," she agreed. "They don't. You're both people at the same time. The monster and the man. And I don't know what to do with that." Victor stood up, moved toward the door. "You don't have to do anything with it. Just survive it. When this is over, you can walk away and never think about me again. Start fresh somewhere. Use those art supplies to build the life you should have had all along." "And what will you do?" "Go back to being the person everyone fears. It's what I'm good at." He left before she could respond, and Lena was alone again in a room that wasn't hers, in a building that smelled like oil and concrete, hiding from people who wanted to kill her because she'd smiled at the wrong man 6 months ago. She lay down on the cot, staring at the ceiling, and wondered if Victor was right. If when this was over, she'd be able to walk away and forget. If the art supplies and the new life would be enough to erase the memory of gunfire and blood and the look in his eyes when he talked about the violence to come. Somehow, she doubted it. Sleep didn't come. Lena lay on the cot listening to footsteps echoing through the warehouse, voices speaking in Russian, the occasional crackle of a radio. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, she gave up pretending and went looking for coffee. The makeshift kitchen was just a corner with a hot plate, a microwave that looked older than she was, and instant coffee that tasted like burnt regret. She was stirring in powdered creamer when Mikhail appeared, moving silent as a cat despite his size. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Can you?" "Not in 15 years. He poured his own cup, didn't bother with creamer. "You get used to it, the adrenaline, the waiting. Eventually your body just accepts that rest is a luxury." Lena leaned against the concrete wall, the cold seeping through her borrowed sweater. "How long have you known? That it would come to this?" "Since the beginning. The Volkovs don't negotiate. They either win or they burn everything trying." He took a drink, grimaced. Mr. Kane kept hoping he could contain it, keep the war limited, minimize casualties. But you can't negotiate with people who see compromise as weakness. "So what happens now?" Mikhail was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee like it held answers. "Now Mr. Kane does what he does best. He removes the problem. By killing more people, by ending a conflict that would have killed dozens if it dragged on for months." He looked at her directly. "I know you don't like the violence. Most decent people don't. But decent people also don't have to make the choices he makes. They get to keep their hands clean and judge from a distance." "That's not fair." "No," Mikhail agreed. "But it's true. You think he likes this? You think he wanted to spend tonight killing 3 men in his own home? He's trying to keep you alive, keep his people alive. Sometimes that requires becoming the monster everyone already thinks he is." Before Lena could respond, Victor's voice cut through the warehouse. "Mikhail, we've got movement." Mikhail was gone before Lena could blink, moving toward the surveillance area Victor had set up. She followed, ignoring the voice in her head that said she should stay hidden, stay safe. Victor stood in front of a bank of monitors showing various angles of the warehouse perimeter. On one screen, 3 cars had pulled up to the fence line, their headlights dark. Men were getting out, at least a dozen of them, all armed. "They tracked us," Victor said, his voice flat. "Faster than I expected." "How?" Mikhail demanded. "Does it matter? They're here." Victor was already moving, pulling weapons from a locker, distributing them to the men who'd appeared from various corners of the warehouse. "We hold the building. They want to fight? We give them one they won't forget." Lena felt her pulse spike. "There's too many of them. You said this place was secure." "Secure doesn't mean impenetrable." Victor handed Mikhail a rifle, checked his own weapon with practiced efficiency. "We have the advantage of position and preparation. They're coming into our territory." "They also have numbers and the element of surprise," Lena shot back. "This is suicide." Victor finally looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that looked almost like apology. "This is survival, and we're better at it than they are." He turned to his men, started issuing orders in Russian. Lena caught fragments, positions, fields of fire, fallback points. This was military strategy happening in real time, and she was standing in the middle of it, useless and terrified. "You," Victor said, focusing on her. "Back room, now. There's a reinforced safe room in the northwest corner. Mikhail will show you. I'm not hiding while you—" "Yes, you are. Because if they get past us, if they get to you, all of this was for nothing." He grabbed her arm, not rough, but firm. "Please, Lena. I can't fight them and worry about you at the same time." Mikhail was already at her other elbow, pulling her toward the back of the warehouse. She let herself be led, hating every step, hating that she was the reason this was happening, hating that she couldn't do anything to help. The safe room was a steel box welded into the corner, barely big enough for 2 people. Mikhail pushed her inside, handed her a phone. "Same protocol as before. 10 minutes of silence, you run. The exit is behind that panel." He pointed to what looked like a solid wall. "Push the 3rd rivet from the bottom. It releases." "Mikhail, take care of him," Mikhail said. "After this is over. He's going to need someone who sees him as more than just the monster." Then he was gone, sealing her in the steel box with nothing but a phone and her racing thoughts. The first gunshots came 30 seconds later. Even through the reinforced walls, the sound was deafening, sharp cracks that made Lena flinch, followed by the deeper boom of something heavier. She pressed her hands over her ears, trying to block it out, but it was everywhere, surrounding her, drowning her in evidence of violence she couldn't see. The firefight lasted 4 minutes that felt like hours. Lena counted shots until she lost track, counted seconds until they blurred together. Then, suddenly, silence. She held her breath, waiting. 1 minute, 2, 3. At 4 minutes, she heard voices, Russian, angry, getting closer. Her hand found the phone, fingers hovering over the call button. Victor had said 10 minutes, but these voices didn't sound like his men. At 5 minutes, someone was right outside the safe room. She heard metal scraping metal, someone testing the door. Her heart hammered so hard she thought they must be able to hear it through the steel. Then a voice, sharp and commanding, "Get away from there! Now!" Victor. Alive. Lena sagged against the wall, relief flooding through her so hard it made her dizzy. The door opened. Victor stood there, blood on his face from a cut above his eye, his shirt torn, but standing. Behind him, Mikhail and 3 others. No sign of the Volkov men. "It's over," Victor said. "You can come out." Lena stepped into the warehouse and immediately regretted it. There were bodies, more than before, scattered across the floor in positions that told stories she didn't want to read. Bullet holes pocked the walls. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air, acrid and choking. "How many?" she asked. "They brought 12. We brought 4 down before they got inside. The rest—" Victor stopped. "It doesn't matter. They're gone. We're not." "Any of ours hurt?" Anton took a round in the shoulder. "He'll live. The rest of us are just bruised and pissed off." Victor was already moving, directing his men to secure the perimeter, clean up the evidence. "But we can't stay here. They'll send more." "Where do we go?" Lena heard the exhaustion in her own voice. "How many safe houses do you have?" "Enough. But that's not the solution anymore." He turned to face her fully. I'm done running, done reacting. Tomorrow, I end this. How? By going after the Volkovs directly. Not their soldiers, not their operations. The leadership. I take out Alexei Volkov and his brother Dmitry. The organization collapses. Without them, there's no one to hold it together. Mikhail stepped forward. That's a suicide mission. They'll have security, multiple layers. You'll never get close. I'll get close because they won't expect it. They think they have me on the defensive, think I'm scrambling to protect what's mine. Victor's voice was cold, calculated. They're wrong, and by the time they realize it, it'll be too late. You're going to kill them, Lena said. Not a question. Yes. The simple acknowledgement should have horrified her. Instead, she just felt numb. They'd moved past horror somewhere around the third dead body. And then what? You think that solves everything? I think it solves the immediate problem of people trying to kill us every 6 hours. Victor ran a hand through his hair, and Lena saw how tired he was. Not just physically, but deeper than that. Tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. I know what you think of me. What you must think of me after tonight, but I'm out of options, Lena. This is the only way forward. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him there had to be another solution, some path that didn't end in more death. But looking around the warehouse, at the evidence of violence that would have included her if Victor hadn't been fast enough, smart enough, ruthless enough, she couldn't find the words. How long? She asked instead. How long what? Until you go after them. Until you do whatever you're planning to do. Tomorrow night, I have someone on the inside who can get me access to their compound. It's a narrow window, but it's enough. And me? You stay here with Mikhail and a security team. This location is compromised, but it'll take them time to organize another assault. Enough time for me to finish this. No. Victor's expression hardened. This isn't negotiable. You're right, it's not. Because I'm not sitting in another steel box waiting to find out if you're alive or dead. Lena moved closer, meeting his gaze. You said I was part of this whether I wanted to be or not. Fine. Then I'm actually part of it. Not just the thing you protect, but someone who has a say in what happens next. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you stop treating me like luggage and start treating me like a person who's survived the same week from hell that you have. She knew she was being irrational, knew that staying locked in the safe room was smarter. But she was so tired of being smart, of being safe, of being nothing but a problem to be solved. You're going after the Volkovs tomorrow. I want to help. Absolutely not. Why? Because you don't trust me? Because if something happens to you, if you get hurt or worse because I brought you into the middle of an assassination. He stopped, jaw tight. I can live with a lot of things, Lena. That's not one of them. And I can't live with hiding while you risk your life to end a war that started because of me. This war started long before you. The only thing you did was give it a face. Then let me help give it an ending. She didn't know where the words were coming from, didn't know when she'd decided that staying behind wasn't an option. But standing in this warehouse, surrounded by evidence of how close death had come, she knew she couldn't do it again. Couldn't sit in a box waiting for silence that might never break. I know the city. I know how to blend in, how to move through neighborhoods without attracting attention. You and Mikhail and your men, you stand out. But me, I'm invisible. I've spent my whole life being invisible. Victor stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You want to be part of an assassination because you're good at being invisible? I want to be part of ending this because I'm tired of being afraid. Because every hour I spend hiding is another hour the Volkovs win. She took a breath. And because maybe if I help end it, I can stop feeling like a victim and start feeling like I have some control over my own life again. The silence stretched between them. Mikhail had moved away, giving them space, but Lena could feel him listening, could feel all of them listening, waiting to see what Victor would say. No, Victor said finally. It's too dangerous. Everything's too dangerous, that's the point. Lena, stop protecting me from the consequences of your world and start letting me navigate them. I'm not asking you to put me in the line of fire. I'm asking you to let me be useful instead of just being the reason you fight. Victor looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The part of him that wanted to keep her locked away, safe and untouched by the ugliness of what he was about to do, battling the part that recognized she was right. that treating her like something fragile wasn't the same as keeping her safe. "If I agree to this," he said slowly, "you follow my orders exactly. No improvising, no taking risks, no trying to be a hero." "I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to be a participant." "Fine. Then here's how it works. Tomorrow, we're going to scout the Volkov compound. You'll come because you're right. You blend in better than we do. But the actual assault, you stay back. You stay safe. And when it's over, when the Volkovs are gone and the threat is neutralized, you get to walk away and build whatever life you want. And you?" "I go back to being what I was before, the monster in the expensive suit." Lena held his gaze. "What if I don't want you to be just that anymore?" The question hung in the air between them, heavier than any of the violence that had come before. Victor's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features before he locked it down. "We should get some rest," he said, not answering. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." He walked away before she could push further, disappearing into the maze of the warehouse. Mikhail appeared at her elbow, his expression unreadable. "That was either very brave or very stupid," he said. "Probably both. Mr. Kane doesn't let people in easily. The fact that he's considering your offer at all means something." "What does it mean?" Mikhail smiled, and it was the first time Lena had seen anything approaching warmth from him. "It means you're not luggage anymore. You're something more dangerous. You're someone he cares about." They moved to a different section of the warehouse for what remained of the night, setting up in a space that Victor assured her was more defensible. Lena tried to sleep and managed maybe 2 hours, her dreams full of gunfire and blood and Victor's face when he'd said he couldn't live with her getting hurt. Dawn came gray and cold. Victor was already awake when Lena emerged from her makeshift room, studying maps spread across a table, marking positions with a precision that spoke to years of practice. "The Volkov compound is in Bridgeport," he said without looking up. "Old industrial area, lots of warehouses and abandoned buildings. They've turned one of the larger structures into their headquarters. Guards at every entrance, surveillance on the perimeter, the whole setup." Lena moved closer, looking at the map. "How do you plan to get inside?" "My inside man works security. He'll create a distraction, take out the cameras for a 5-minute window. That's all I need to get in, do what needs to be done, and get out. And if something goes wrong, then I improvise." He finally looked at her. "Your job is to be our eyes on the street. There's a coffee shop 3 blocks from the compound. You'll set up there with a laptop and a radio. If you see anything unusual, police, reinforcements, anything that suggests our window is closing, you let me know immediately." "That's it? I just sit in a coffee shop?" "You sit in a coffee shop and you keep me from walking into a trap I don't see coming. That's not a small job, Lena. That's the difference between success and a bloodbath." She studied the map, tracing the streets with her finger. "What time?" "We leave at 4. The meet is at 7, after dark. Gives us time to position everyone, run through the plan one more time. And if it works? If you actually pull this off? If it works, the Volkov organization collapses within 48 hours. Their operations fall apart. Their territory gets absorbed by smaller crews and the threat to you disappears." He rolled up the map. "You get your life back." "What about you? What do you get?" Victor's laugh was bitter. "Peace, maybe. For a little while. Until the next threat emerges and the cycle starts over." "It doesn't have to be like that." "Yes," he said quietly. "It does. This is the life I chose. Or the life that chose me. Either way, it's what I am." The rest of the day passed in preparation. Victor's men cleaned weapons, ran communications checks, reviewed the plan until everyone could recite it in their sleep. Lena watched from the sidelines, feeling useless despite Victor's assurances that her role mattered. Around 3, Mikhail found her in the corner where she'd been sketching, nervous energy needing an outlet. He looked at her drawing, a rough map of the compound with shadows that didn't quite match the light sources. "You're worried," he said. "Of course I'm worried. People are going to die tonight." "People were always going to die. At least this way it ends." "You really believe that? That killing 2 men solves everything?" Mikhail sat down beside her, his bulk making the chair creak. "I believe that in this world, power is the only thing that matters. And right now the Volkovs have enough power to threaten Mr. Kane, threaten you, threaten the stability he's built. Removing them restores balance. Balance built on violence. All balance is built on violence. The only question is whether it's controlled or chaotic. He gestured at her drawing. You're good at seeing shadows where they shouldn't be. That's going to be useful tonight. At 4 o'clock, they loaded into vehicles. Lena rode with Victor and Mikhail, the silence in the SUV heavy with anticipation. The drive to Bridgeport took 30 minutes through Chicago's evening traffic, past neighborhoods that shifted from commercial to residential to industrial decay. The coffee shop Victor had mentioned was exactly the kind of place Lena would have hung out in her old life. Worn furniture, art on the walls from local artists, the smell of over-roasted beans. She ordered a latte she didn't want and sat up at a table by the window, laptop open, radio earpiece hidden under her hair. Victor and Mikhail continued on, disappearing into the maze of warehouses and abandoned buildings. Lena pulled up the surveillance feeds Victor had hacked earlier. Grainy black and white images of the Volkov compound, guards moving through their rotations, lights coming on as darkness fell. Radio check, Victor's voice crackled in her ear. You copy? I copy, Lena said quietly, pretending to be on a phone call. Feed looks good. I count 6 guards on the perimeter, 2 at the main entrance. Copy that. We're in position, waiting for the window. The next 45 minutes were the longest of Lena's life. She nursed her latte, pretended to work on the laptop, watched the street for any sign of trouble. A police car cruised by once, and her heart nearly stopped, but it kept going. 2 men in suits walked past the coffee shop, and she studied them until she was sure they were just businessmen heading home late. At 6:45, 3 black SUVs pulled up to the compound's gates. Lena's pulse spiked. Victor, you seen this? 3 vehicles just arrived. I see them. That's the Volkov brothers and their inner circle, right on schedule. A pause. This just got easier or a lot more complicated. How so? All the primary targets are about to be in the same building. Either we end this tonight with one strike, or we're walking into a room full of people who want us dead. Can you pull this off? About to find out. Stand by. On the surveillance feed, Lena watched the guards at the gate checking IDs, waving the SUVs through. The vehicles disappeared into the compound, and for a moment, everything was still. Then the lights went out. The entire compound went dark, emergency lighting kicking on a second later but providing only dim illumination. On the feed, Lena could see guards scrambling, pulling weapons, moving toward the main building. Windows open, Victor's voice said. Going in. Lena's hands tightened on the laptop, watching the feeds like her life depended on it, which, in a way, it did. She saw movement, shadows that might have been Victor and his team, or might have been guards, impossible to tell in the low light. Then gunfire. Muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness, sharp and brief. Shouting, in Russian and English. More shots. Victor, Lena said into the radio. Victor, what's happening? Static. Then, situation's contained. Stand by. Contained didn't tell her anything. Didn't tell her if he was hurt, if the plan was working, if any of this was worth the cost. She watched the feeds, counting shadows, counting shots, trying to read a story from images that told her nothing. 5 minutes passed. The gunfire stopped. The guards on the perimeter were moving toward the main building now, responding to something Lena couldn't see. Then Victor's voice. It's done. Package is secured. All targets neutralized. Neutralized. The word was clinical, empty of the reality it represented. Men were dead. The Volkov brothers. Their inner circle, however many others had been in that building. Copy that, Lena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Perimeter guards are converging on your position. You've got maybe 3 minutes before they breach. More than enough. Moving to extraction point now. She watched the feeds, saw shadows emerging from the main building, moving with purpose toward the north fence. Saw the guards reaching the building, entering, chaos erupting as they found whatever Victor had left behind. Then the feeds went dark. Someone had found the surveillance system, cut it off. I've lost visual, Lena said. Don't need it, we're clear. Victor's breathing was heavy in her ear. Stay put, Mikhail's coming to get you, 3 minutes. Lena closed the laptop, left money on the table for the latte, and walked outside on shaking legs. The street looked normal, cars passing, people heading home from work, the city indifferent to the violence that had just unfolded 3 blocks away. She could hear sirens in the distance, growing closer. Mikhail's SUV pulled up to the curb exactly 3 minutes later. She climbed in, and they drove away at a normal speed, just another vehicle in Chicago's evening traffic. "Where's Victor?" she asked. "Different vehicle, security protocol. We'll meet him at the rendezvous." The rendezvous turned out to be another warehouse, this one on the north side. Victor was already there when they arrived, standing in the middle of an empty space, staring at nothing. His hands were clean. He'd washed them somewhere. But there was blood on his collar, his cuffs, evidence he hadn't bothered to hide. Lena walked up to him slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "Is it over? The Volkovs are dead. All of them. The organization will tear itself apart fighting over the scraps." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were empty. "It's over. You did it. I did something. Whether it was the right thing remains to be seen." He moved past her, heading for a door at the back of the warehouse. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll start figuring out what comes next." But Lena caught his arm, stopped him. "Victor." He turned back, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked truly vulnerable, like the armor had cracked, and something human was showing through. "Thank you," she said, "for keeping me alive." "That's what I do, keep people alive." "No," Lena corrected. "That's what you did tonight. There's a difference." He held her gaze for a long moment, and something passed between them that Lena couldn't name. Understanding, maybe, or recognition, or just the shared knowledge that they'd survived something that should have killed them both. "Get some rest," he said again, quieter this time. "We'll talk in the morning." This time, she let him go. Morning came with the kind of silence that follows violence, the world holding its breath to see what would rise from the ashes. Lena woke in yet another unfamiliar room, this one cleaner than the warehouse, but just as temporary. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or why her entire body ached like she'd been running for days. Then it all came back. The compound, the gunfire, Victor's voice saying it was over. She found him in what passed for a living room, sitting on a worn couch with a laptop, monitoring news feeds. The television was on mute, showing aerial footage of the Bridgeport warehouse surrounded by police tape and emergency vehicles. "They're calling it a gang war," Victor said without looking up. "Rival factions, internal dispute, the usual story the media tells when they don't want to dig deeper." Lena sat down beside him, watching the footage. "How many?" 7 confirmed dead. The Volkov brothers, 3 of their lieutenants, 2 guards who were in the wrong place. He closed the laptop. "Could have been worse. Could have been you. Could have been both of us." He finally looked at her, and the emptiness from last night was still there, lurking behind his eyes. "I've been doing this for 15 years, Lena. Last night was the first time I walked into a situation thinking about what would happen to someone else if I didn't walk back out. That's called caring about people. Most humans do it. Most humans don't have body counts." "No," she agreed, "but most humans also don't take on an entire criminal organization to keep someone safe." Victor stood up, moved to the window. Dawn light was breaking over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that seemed obscene, given everything that had happened. "The Volkov organization is already fracturing. My contacts tell me 3 different crews are fighting over territory, and the police are using the chaos to sweep up anyone stupid enough to be visible. Within a week, they'll be gone entirely." "And you? What happens to you?" "I go back to business, clean up the mess, rebuild what got damaged, make sure everyone knows the war is over, and we won." He turned back to face her. "And you get to leave, like I promised." The words should have brought relief, freedom, safety, the chance to reclaim her life. Instead, Lena felt something twist in her chest. "Just like that? Just like that. I'll set you up with new identification if you want it, money to start over wherever you choose. You could be in Seattle by tomorrow, Miami by the weekend, anywhere that's not Chicago and not my problem anymore." "Is that what I am? Your problem?" "You know what I mean." "Do I?" Lena stood up, moved closer. "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're trying to get rid of me as fast as possible now that I'm not useful anymore." Victor's jaw tightened. "That's not... I'm trying to give you your life back. The one you had before I destroyed it. My life before was pouring coffee for people who didn't see me and going home to an apartment I could barely afford. You didn't destroy that, you interrupted it." She took a breath. "And yeah, the interruption involved fires and guns and more fear than I ever want to experience again. But it also involved someone seeing me, really seeing me. Not just the waitress with the quick smile, but the person underneath. Lena, I'm not finished. You spent weeks telling me I was in danger, that I needed protection, that my life depended on staying close to you. And now that the danger's gone, you're just going to ship me off somewhere and go back to being the feared kingpin? She shook her head. That's not how this works. Then tell me how it works. Because I don't know. Victor's composure cracked, frustration bleeding through. I don't know how to do this. How to be the person I am and also be someone who deserves to have you in his life. Maybe you don't deserve it. Maybe I don't either, but that's not the question. Lena moved closer, closing the distance between them. The question is whether we want to try anyway. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Victor reached out, his hand finding hers, and for a moment they just stood there, two people who'd survived hell together, trying to figure out what came after. I've spent 15 years building walls, Victor said quietly, keeping people at a distance because distance is safe. I can't make decisions that get people killed if I don't care about them in the first place. And now I care about you, and that terrifies me more than anything the Volkovs ever did. Lena squeezed his hand. Good. You should be terrified. I'm terrifying. Despite everything, Victor laughed. It was a broken sound, rough with exhaustion and relief, but it was real. What do you want, Lena? Really want, not what you think you should want, not what makes sense. What do you actually want when all of this is over? She thought about it. Really thought about it. Not the reflexive answer about safety and normalcy, but the truth that had been building in her chest for days. I want to paint. Really paint, not just sketch in corners when I have time. I want to create something that matters, that says something about the world and the people in it. Then do it. I'll cover rent on a studio, living expenses, whatever you need. I don't want your money. It's not about wanting it. It's about having the freedom to create without worrying about how you'll eat or where you'll sleep. Victor's grip on her hand tightened. Let me give you that, not because I'm trying to buy you or assuage my guilt, but because I want to see what you create when you're not limited by poverty and fear. And what do you get out of it? The knowledge that something good came from all of this. He paused. And maybe, if you're willing, the chance to be part of your life. Not as a protector or patron, but as someone who wants to know you. The real you, not the version you show to customers at a diner. Lena studied his face, looking for the catch, the angle, the manipulation. But all she saw was vulnerability and hope and fear, wrapped up in the features of a man who killed people for a living, but looked at her art like it was sacred. I'm not going to be easy to know, she said. I'm going to have nightmares about gunfire. I'm going to flinch at shadows. I'm going to look at you sometimes and remember that you're capable of violence I can't even imagine. I know, and I'm going to want you anyway. I already do. Which makes me either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Both, Victor said, and he was smiling now, really smiling. Definitely both. So what's the plan? You go back to running Chicago's underworld and I paint in some studio you're renting and we pretend that's a normal relationship? Nothing about this will ever be normal, but maybe normal is overrated. He pulled her closer. You paint. I do what I do, and we figure out how to exist in the same world without either of us losing who we are. That's a terrible plan. You have a better one? Lena thought about it. Thought about the alternative. Taking his money and disappearing, starting over somewhere safe and boring where no one knew her name or her history. Thought about years from now, wondering what would have happened if she'd been brave enough to stay. No, she admitted. I don't have a better plan. Then we try the terrible one and see what happens. Before Lena could respond, Mikhail appeared in the doorway, his timing impeccable as always. Mr. Kane, we have visitors. Victor's entire demeanor shifted, the softness replaced by cold calculation. What kind of visitors? The kind wearing badges, FBI specifically. They want to talk about last night. Victor released Lena's hand, all business now. How many? 2 agents. They're waiting downstairs, very polite, very insistent. Give me 5 minutes. Victor turned back to Lena. Stay here. This doesn't concern you. Everything about you concerns me now. Apparently that's what I signed up for. Lena, I'm not arguing, I'm stating fact. Now go talk to your federal agents before they decide to be less polite. Victor looked like he wanted to argue, but Mikhail was already gesturing toward the door. He left, and Lena was alone with her racing thoughts and the realization that choosing to stay meant choosing all of it. The danger, the complications, the federal agents showing up at dawn. She moved to the window, watching the street below. A black sedan was parked at the curb, government issue obvious. Two people in suits stood beside it, waiting with the patience of people who knew they held all the cards. 15 minutes later, Victor was back. His expression was carefully neutral, which Lena had learned meant he was working through something complicated. "What did they want?" she asked, to remind me that they're watching, that last night's violence didn't go unnoticed, even if the official story is gang warfare. He poured himself a drink, even though it was barely 8 in the morning. "They also wanted to offer a deal." "What kind of deal?" "The kind where I provide them with information about other criminal organizations in exchange for a lighter touch on my operations. Become a confidential informant, essentially." Lena's stomach dropped. "What did you tell them?" "That I'd think about it." He took a drink. "Which is code for no, but saying no directly tends to make them more aggressive." "So now you have federal attention on top of everything else." "I've always had federal attention. That's the cost of doing business at my level. The question is whether they're serious about pursuing it or just rattling cages to see what falls out." Victor set the glass down. "But it does complicate things. If they decide to actually build a case, being associated with me becomes more dangerous than it already is." "Are you trying to scare me off?" "I'm trying to be honest about what staying means. It means more than just accepting who I am. It means accepting the consequences of who I am." Lena moved closer, taking the glass from his hand and setting it aside. "I spent my entire life playing it safe, taking the easy path, the smart choice, the option that didn't risk anything. And you know what it got me? A studio apartment in a building that burned down and dreams I was too afraid to chase. So yeah, staying with you is complicated and dangerous and probably stupid, but at least it's not safe. At least it's choosing something instead of just letting life happen to me." Victor pulled her close, and for a moment they just stood there, holding on to each other like anchors in a storm. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly. "How to be what you need." "Then we'll figure it out together. Make mistakes, fix them, make new ones. That's what people do." Normal people. We already established we're not normal. The weeks that followed were an education in contradictions. Victor went back to running his empire, handling the aftermath of the Volkov collapse with ruthless efficiency. Territory was redistributed, alliances were reinforced, and the message went out that while Victor Kane might have been challenged, he had not been beaten. Lena found a studio space in a warehouse district that was slowly gentrifying, full of artists and musicians and people who asked questions about her work instead of her background. Victor paid the first year's rent in cash, and when she tried to argue, he pointed out that she could spend her energy fighting him about money, or actually creating something. She chose the latter. The paintings came fast once she had space and time and materials that didn't make her feel guilty for using them. Dark pieces, initially, full of shadows and fire and the fear she'd been carrying. But gradually, light started creeping in. Chicago street scenes, yes, but also portraits of people surviving. Mikhail, somehow both threatening and protective in the same frame. Rosie from the diner, tough and warm in equal measure. Victor, captured in a moment when he thought no one was watching, the armor down and something achingly human showing through. They saw each other when they could, which wasn't as often as either of them wanted, but more than Lena had expected. Victor would show up at the studio late at night, carrying food from whatever restaurant he'd been using for a business meeting, and they'd eat among the half-finished canvases, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about the politics of his world, the delicate balance of power and fear that kept it all functioning. She told him about color theory and composition, and the way light changed depending on the time of day. It wasn't normal, it wasn't safe, but it was theirs. 3 months after the Volkovs fell, Sarah cornered Lena at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. They'd been slowly rebuilding their friendship, carefully navigating around the parts of Lena's life she couldn't explain. "So, are you going to tell me what actually happened?" Sarah asked, stirring sugar into her latte with more force than necessary. "The real story, not the version where you're just staying with a friend who happens to have enough money to set you up in a studio and fund your art career." Lena had been expecting this conversation for weeks. It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated lately. Your building burns down, you disappear for weeks, you come back and suddenly you're a working artist with a mysterious benefactor. I'm not stupid, Lena. I never said you were. Then stop treating me like I can't handle the truth. Sarah set her cup down. I've known you for 8 years. I know when you're hiding something. And I know when you're scared, you're both right now. Lena took a breath. If I tell you, you can't repeat it to anyone, not even people you trust. That's a great way to start a story. I'm serious, Sarah. Something in Lena's voice must have gotten through because Sarah's expression shifted from frustrated to concerned. Okay, I'm listening. So Lena told her. Not everything. Some things were Victor's secrets to share or not share, but enough. The diner, the flirtation, the revelation of who Victor really was, the fire, the violence, the decision to stay instead of run. When she finished, Sarah was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. You're dating a mobster, Sarah said flatly. I'm seeing someone who operates outside conventional legal frameworks, Lena corrected. And yes, I know how that sounds. It sounds insane. It sounds like you've lost your mind and developed Stockholm Syndrome. It's not Stockholm Syndrome if I'm choosing to stay after the danger's gone. Is the danger gone? Because from what you just told me, it sounds like you're one federal investigation away from being a very interesting footnote in someone's RICO case. Lena couldn't argue with that. I know it's not smart. I know it's not what you'd choose for me. But for the first time in my life, I'm not just surviving. I'm actually living, creating things that matter, being with someone who sees me as more than just potential. He's also killed people. Yes. And you're okay with that? Lena thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I'm not okay with it. I don't think I'll ever be okay with it, but I also understand that his world has different rules than ours. And he's trying, really trying to be more than just the violence. Sarah was quiet for a long time, stirring her latte even though the sugar had long since dissolved. I don't like this, she said finally. I don't like that you're in danger, that you're involved with someone whose life is measured in body counts. But you're an adult. You get to make your own terrible decisions. Thanks? That's very supportive. I'm not going to support this, but I'm also not going to abandon you because of it. Sarah reached across the table, taking Lena's hand. Just promise me you'll be careful, and that if it gets to be too much, if you need out, you'll call me. No judgment, no questions, just help. I promise. Good. Now tell me about the art. Because if you're going to date a criminal, at least let something good come from it. 6 months became a year. Lena's first gallery show happened on a rainy October evening, a small venue in Pilsen that normally showed experimental photography and abstract installations. She debated whether to invite Victor, knowing his presence would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer, but in the end, she left his name on the list. He showed up 30 minutes into the opening, wearing a suit that probably cost more than everything else in the room combined. Mikhail flanked him, scanning the crowd with the vigilance of someone who saw threats everywhere. Lena watched them enter, saw the subtle shift in the room's energy as people unconsciously moved away from the danger they couldn't quite identify. Victor found her in front of her largest piece, a canvas that depicted Chicago at sunset, the city burning and beautiful at the same time. You did it, he said quietly. Did what? Created something that matters. Something that'll outlast all of us. Lena looked at the painting, seeing it through his eyes. All her fear and anger and hope rendered in oil and canvas, permanent and real. I couldn't have done it without you. You would have found a way. You're too stubborn not to. Maybe, but it would have taken longer, been harder. She turned to face him. Thank you for seeing something in me when I couldn't see it myself. I saw what was always there. You just needed time and space to let it out. The gallery owner approached, a nervous-looking woman who clearly recognized that Victor was someone important even if she couldn't place him. Ms. Voss, there's a buyer interested in the Chicago piece. They're asking about price. Lena named a figure that would have been absurd a year ago, but felt right now, earned through months of work and fear and growth. The gallery owner nodded and disappeared. You're selling it? Victor asked. That's how this works. People buy the art. I make more art. I'll buy it. Whatever they're offering, I'll double it. Victor, I'm serious. I want that piece. Want to look at it every day and remember that something good came from all the violence. Lena studied his face, seeing past the calm exterior to the need underneath. It's yours, but not because you're paying double, because you understand what it means. The piece sold to Victor, though he insisted on paying full price plus a commission that made Lena's head spin. 3 more paintings went that night, bought by people who saw something in her work that resonated. By the time the gallery closed, Lena had enough money to cover 6 months of expenses and the validation that she wasn't just playing at being an artist. She was one. Victor took her to dinner at a place so exclusive it didn't have a sign, just a door that opened if you knew to knock. They sat in a private room overlooking the city, eating food that was more art than sustenance, talking about the show and the buyers and what came next. I'm proud of you, Victor said over dessert, in case that wasn't clear. It was clear, but hearing it doesn't hurt. You've built something real, something that's entirely yours, not dependent on me or my money or my connections. That matters. The money helped, Lena pointed out. The money bought time. You did everything else. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I want you to know that whatever happens, whatever comes next, you don't need me to keep being who you've become. You're an artist because you chose to be, because you put in the work, because you have talent worth developing, not because I wrote some checks. Why does this sound like a goodbye speech? Victor was quiet for a moment, and Lena felt her stomach drop. The FBI is getting more aggressive. They've subpoenaed financial records, started interviewing people in my organization. My lawyer thinks they're building a RICO case. How serious? Serious enough that I'm making contingency plans, moving assets, creating distance between my legitimate businesses and the other operations. He squeezed her hand, and making sure that when it comes down, you're protected. Your studio is leased under a shell company with no connection to me. Your bank accounts are clean. Anything you've bought or sold has paperwork that'll withstand scrutiny. You're protecting me from your own investigation. I'm protecting you from the consequences of being associated with me. There's a difference. Lena pulled her hand back, anger flaring. You don't get to make that decision for me. If you're in trouble, if there's going to be legal consequences, I want to know. I want to help. How? By being subpoenaed as a witness? By having your career destroyed before it's even really started because you're connected to a mobster? By being there. By not running when things get hard. She stood up, needing to move. You told me months ago that staying meant accepting all the consequences. I accepted them. Don't try to protect me from them now. I'm trying to protect you from going to prison for obstruction or conspiracy or any of the other charges they'll throw at anyone in my orbit. Then don't give them anything to charge me with. Keep me separate from your business, keep our relationship personal, and trust that I'm smart enough to navigate a federal investigation without implicating myself. Victor looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're not going to walk away. No, I'm not. I told you that a year ago, and I'm telling you now. Whatever's coming, we face it together. You might regret that. Probably. But it'll be my regret to own. The federal investigation took another 8 months to materialize into actual charges. When it came, it was exactly as serious as Victor had feared. A massive RICO case targeting his organization and a dozen others, alleging everything from extortion to money laundering to conspiracy to commit murder. Victor's name was at the top of the indictment. The arrest happened at dawn, federal agents flooding his penthouse, rebuilt after the Volkov attack, with the kind of overwhelming force reserved for people they considered dangerous. Lena wasn't there, having gone home to her own apartment the night before, but Mikhail called her within minutes. He's in custody, Mikhail said, his voice tight. Don't try to contact him. Don't go to the courthouse. Don't do anything that creates a connection between you and this case. Is he okay? Physically, yes. Everything else, we'll see. The trial lasted 4 months. Lena watched from the gallery, careful to sit in different sections each day, never in the same spot twice. She saw Victor in his expensive suits, looking calm and controlled while prosecutors detailed 15 years of criminal activity. Saw witnesses testify about violence she'd tried not to imagine. Saw evidence that painted him as exactly the monster he'd always said he was. But she also saw moments where the armor cracked, When they talked about his father's death, the empire he'd inherited too young. When they detailed how he'd protected his people, taken care of families, built something that was brutal but also stable in a world that was chaos. The prosecution wanted to paint him as purely evil, but the reality was more complicated. The jury deliberated for 6 days. When they came back, the verdict was mixed. Guilty on some charges, not guilty on others, hung on the most serious counts. It wasn't the vindication Victor's lawyers had hoped for, but it also wasn't the complete destruction the prosecution wanted. Sentencing came 2 months later. The judge gave Victor 5 years, with credit for time served and possibility of early release for good behavior. It could have been 20. It could have been life. Lena was there when they took him away. She watched him walk out of the courtroom in handcuffs, watched him disappear into a system designed to break people like him, and she made a decision. The next 5 years weren't easy. Lena visited Victor as often as the prison allowed, driving 3 hours each way to a facility that was more humane than some, but still fundamentally about punishment and control. They talked through phones separated by glass, about her art and his legal appeals and the life they'd built that was now on hold. Her career grew in his absence. A second show, then a third, then gallery representation that meant steady sales and real recognition. She painted the city she loved and the violence she'd survived and the complicated man who'd changed her life. Critics called her work raw and honest, unflinching in its examination of power and survival. They didn't know how much of it was autobiography. Victor got out after 3 years, his sentence reduced for cooperation with an investigation into corruption within the prison system. He walked out of the gate on a cold November morning to find Lena waiting in a car she'd bought with money from her art, wearing a coat she'd chosen herself, no longer the waitress who'd poured his coffee and wondered what he saw in her. He slid into the passenger seat, looking thinner, harder, but alive. "You came." "Of course I came. Where else would I be?" "Living your life. Moving on. Finding someone who doesn't come with federal convictions and a reputation that'll follow you forever." Lena started the car, pulling into traffic. "I did live my life. I moved on from who I was. But I didn't find someone else because I didn't want someone else. I wanted you. I still do. I'm not who I was. Prison changes people." "Good. I'm not who I was either. We'll figure out who we are now together." They drove back to Chicago in silence, both of them processing the weight of what came next. Victor's empire was gone, seized by the government or absorbed by rivals. His reputation was intact enough that people still feared him, but the power was mostly memory now. He was just a man, released early from a sentence he'd earned, trying to figure out what came after. Lena had bought a loft in the same building as her studio, big enough for 2 if they were willing to share space. She showed it to him that first night, watching his face as he took in the art on the walls, the furniture she'd chosen, the life she'd built. "This is what you created while I was gone," he said. "Part of it. The rest is figuring out what we create together now that we both get a second chance." Victor moved through the space, touching things lightly, like he was afraid they'd disappear. "I don't know how to be ordinary, how to be just a person without the power and the fear and the control." "Then don't be ordinary, be extraordinary in different ways." Lena moved closer. "Use what you know to help people instead of control them. Build something legal and real and lasting. You're smart enough. You're disciplined enough. You just need a different target. And you think I can do that? I think you survived 3 years in federal prison with your mind intact and your principles mostly solid. If you can do that, you can do anything." It took time. Victor started small, consulting for security firms that needed someone who understood how criminals thought. Then private investigation work, using his connections to help people who'd been failed by conventional systems. The money wasn't what he'd made before, but it was honest, and it was enough. Lena kept painting, kept building her career. Her 4th show included a series of portraits titled After the Fall, each one depicting someone rebuilding from destruction. Victor was in one of them, though only she knew which one. The collection sold out before the opening was over. 2 years after his release, Victor proposed. Not with a ring. Too traditional, he said, and also complicated by the fact that jewelry made him think of blood money and assets seized by federal agents. Instead, he gave her a set of keys to a building he'd bought in her name, a place big enough for both a studio and a gallery, with an apartment above where they could live. I can't accept this, Lena said, staring at the keys. You can. It's yours, legally and completely. I bought it with money I earned legally, and it's titled in your name only. No strings, no complications. Victor, I spent 15 years taking things from people. Let me give something instead. Let me help you build something that'll outlast both of us. Lena looked at the keys, then at the man holding them out. He was different from the person she'd met in the diner all those years ago, scarred by prison, humbled by loss, rebuilt into something that was somehow more human than what he'd been before. On one condition. What condition? You work there with me, not as my benefactor or my protector, but as my partner. We build this together. Victor smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way that still surprised her. Deal. The gallery opened 6 months later. Lena's work filled the main space, but they also showed other artists, emerging voices who needed a platform, people with stories worth telling. Victor handled the business side with the same precision he'd once used to run a criminal empire, except now he was negotiating with art buyers instead of rival gangs. They lived in the apartment above the gallery, in a space that was theirs in a way nothing else had ever been. Some nights, Lena would wake to find Victor standing at the window, looking out at the city he'd once controlled, and she knew he was wrestling with ghosts she couldn't see. But he always came back to bed, always chose the present over the past. On their first anniversary of opening the gallery, Lena stood in the main room after closing, looking at the collection they'd curated together. Victor joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. You know what I was thinking about today? He said. What? That morning in the diner, when I told you who I really was and you looked at me like I'd just destroyed your world. You had destroyed my world. I know, but if I could go back, knowing everything that would happen, the violence, the fear, the prison sentence, all of it, I'd still walk into that diner. I'd still order coffee from the waitress who made terrible jokes about my tie. Because it led here. To this. Lena turned in his arms, looking up at him. I used to think the worst thing that ever happened to me was my building burning down. Losing everything I owned, being forced into a world I didn't understand. But it wasn't the worst thing. It was the catalyst. The moment that forced me to stop playing it safe and start actually living. Even if living meant danger and federal investigations and watching someone you cared about go to prison, even then. Because the alternative was spending my life wondering what I could have been if I'd been brave enough to try. Victor kissed her, and it still felt like the first time, complicated and real and weighted with everything they'd survived to get here. When they broke apart, he said, I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. Good. I don't want to imagine a world where I'm not. They locked up the gallery together, climbing the stairs to the apartment that was home in a way nowhere else had ever been. And if sometimes Lena still had nightmares about gunfire, if Victor still woke up thinking he was back in a cell, they had each other to navigate the darkness. They had art and purpose, and a future they were building together from the wreckage of everything they'd been before. Lena Voss had been a waitress who poured coffee and dreamed small dreams. Then she'd become a target, a survivor, a partner to someone the world called a monster. Now she was an artist, a gallery owner, a woman who'd learned that safety was overrated and courage came in forms she'd never expected. Victor Kane had been a criminal, a kingpin, a man defined by fear and violence. Then he'd been an inmate, a convict, someone the system tried to break. Now he was a partner, a consultant, a man learning that power came in forms that had nothing to do with how many people were afraid of you. Together, they were proof that people could change without losing themselves entirely, that love could grow in the spaces between violence and peace, that sometimes the worst thing that ever happened to you was also the thing that saved you from a life half-lived. The city kept spinning around them, indifferent to their story, but they'd carved out a corner of it that was theirs, built from ashes and determination and the stubborn refusal to let their past define their future. It wasn't the life either of them had planned. It was better. And on quiet mornings, when they had coffee together in the gallery before opening, Lena would sometimes catch Victor looking at her the way he had in the diner all those years ago, like she was the only real thing in a world of illusions. Except now she looked back the same way, because she'd learned that real things were worth fighting for, even when the fight cost more than you'd ever imagined paying. They'd survive the fire, the war, the federal investigation, and the long separation. They'd survive whatever came next, too. Together. That was the only truth that mattered.